Gonna record it. There we go. Recording in progress to the cloud, wherever that exists. There are not too many clouds out today, and it's been really nice. So I hope this doesn't prevent you from enjoying your day out in the world. We're here to talk regionalism and a brief update to you, all of you, the coalition of the willing. And I'm using that term in a loving way, and I really appreciate your being here today. Good afternoon. I think in some cases you're joining me again, maybe in most cases to talk about this riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in whatever it is about Southeast Michigan. But to be fair, this is something that we face across the country and in fact around the world, this idea of regionalism. And for some reason, I don't know why, I guess it's something I just have had roiling around in my head for as long as I can remember. And despite what many of you have said as strong advice to steer clear, it keeps pulling me back in. So here I am. It's been a year since I started these call them opening salvo presentation on this big picture inquiry into what I think is still our greatest opportunity. And as these things so often are, the big O is also the big C. It remains our biggest challenge. I firmly believe that everything we do in Southeast Michigan from a policy and governing perspective would be better served through a stronger regional approach, one that prioritizes the health and well-being, especially of its urban core, and building that up and manifesting an approach through shared metrics and feedback and collective action to put us on a more equitable and visionary path, a more progressive path, so that we can share prosperity and grow everybody. So I think, I just want to share one of the starkest bits of advice I've had since hearing from some of you is not to lead with the word regional, mostly because the term can be perceived and appropriated in counterproductive ways. And I hear that. I definitely hear that. And so I just want you all to know that, this working title of Regionalism Now is something of a, it's a shorthand placeholder between us in a shared spirit of friendship and collaboration and thought partnership, because I believe, you're here because I believe you get it to some degree and want to see this idea grow and blossom in whatever way we call it. So we've been meeting for a year, as I said. I've done an earlier presentation. I think it was July 1st of last year. So we made it just under the year, and I've done, and I'll say we as much as I can, because it really has become more of a collaborative effort. We've done several of these presentations to over 100 attendees. There was a survey attached to that, and we have, I think, closer to 120 survey responses now. Thank you for filling those out. They're very interesting, and I'm going to share some of those results. We have a mailing list of over 200 people. Yes, I took contacts from my email and added them to, I put people on an email list. I hope I don't spam you too much. I definitely won't include you if you don't want to hear from us, but most people have been really great about it and very supportive. So I respect that and thank you for that. And from the first survey, we have kind of this like opt-in gradation where we have about 100 of those people who are self-identified as, or we're calling coalition of the willing, people who want follow-up and want to be engaged on some level. And for the last year, a smaller subset of you, both through individual meetings and some more recently in some group settings, have been meeting as this working committee that we'll talk about too, a working group. You know, at the same time, over the last year, we continue to be Detroit and Southeast Michigan. You know, we have a declining population, an aging population, even with an undercount, which I believe is true. We're still losing people as a city, and we're a flat growth region, which, you know, folks like Kurt have been saying for a long time. Our infrastructure is woefully out of date, and we still don't have a workable transit solution. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. These are just some headlines from the last year. I feel like I'm missing some things. And in fact, part of what I like to do is better document regional dysfunction. But we know that the city and the region continue to languish, and we are aching, I think, for reframing and action on a larger, broader, and more coordinated level. So, you know, what are we doing? Like, what are things that we've been working on over the last year? And that's why we're here. And I'm very excited to share with you some of your feedback and some possible next steps today. So here we go. Today's agenda, I wanted to share these survey responses. I think there's some interesting insights, probably won't surprise people too much, but I think still worth sharing and reaffirming some key ideas. I want to talk about the working group discussions that we've been having, as well as share kind of the outcomes of that so far, these 3 program options that we have identified for potential next steps that, you know, we can take over the coming months and going forward. I knew going into this is like a long burn thing. This is not something I'm getting paid for currently. It was all, you know, based on this idea. My COVID thing was, I need to do something publicly I need to move my own needle on this issue. And so this is something that, you know, I've just been working on in between time, and hopefully with your help. And it has been, I think, a great feeling so far to know that so many people are supportive of this idea. So with that, you know, again, this is something that is everybody, and we need you for what comes next. Let's go into the survey responses that we got from the last, I would say, 6 months or so. And as I said, also, I think we're closer to 120. We had some come in recently. I think what I downloaded earlier was closer to 110. So we're going with 111. I don't think things have changed that much. On a scale of 1 to 5, and this is the very scientific Likert scale of 1 being not so much and 5 being oh so much. Maybe 4 was like so much. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you think Metro Detroit's lack of regional cooperation keeps it from realizing its potential as a dynamic regional economy? So I underline that because the next question is a slight take off that. So as you can see, the vast majority of responses are in the, you know, so much or oh so much category. Over 91% think that we are lacking a dynamic regional economy because of, we could have a better regional economy because we lack regional cooperation. We are not realizing our potential. The next one, as I mentioned, is related. So it's the same scale. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you think Metro Detroit's lack of regional cooperation keeps it from realizing its potential as an equitable community? So this was interesting because the overall, you know, numbers of 4 and 5 are pretty similar, about 91%. But on the equity scale, on the sense of people feeling that things are inequitable, the oh so much or 5 was 10% more. And I thought that was an interesting discrepancy between the two, but overall, also very much in the 4s and 5s. The next one, all things considered, I'm sorry, all things are connected, but if you were to make one aspect of local government work best for the greatest number of people in Metro Detroit, what would it be? So we're asking people to choose one, maybe not surprising, the big issues of schools and public transit far outweigh everything else. However, things like planning and development and roads and infrastructure and taxes also show up. Basic city services, interestingly, smaller percentage. There were a lot of specific answers to this that I won't get into. If you're interested, we can follow up. But in terms of the big issues, these may not be surprising. Schools and public transit continue to be real regional issues. This one is a takeoff of the last question, and I'm asking people to choose, or ask people to choose their top 3 choices. And let's see here. There we go. That racism. So these issues along the left were things that I included in the survey as specific hurdles. A lot of people added to this. I left that option open for other. So there were lots and lots of additional responses. I think maybe close to 30 or 40 responses in addition to these. But as you can see, racism is the biggest hurdle that's perceived to be to regional cooperation and governance, with close to 78%. An interesting correlated secondary is fragmented politics, far below, but still stand alone as a second place. And then, other issues, ideas, classism, fear of change, lack of imagination, and sprawl were all in the high 20s. General apathy was one. And then generational resistance, which I thought was an interesting test balloon, came out in the bottom, which I'm actually sort of happy about in a way. I hate sort of the idea that everything should be blamed on one generation or another, but I wanted to put that in there. Can we blame this all on the baby boomers? No, we can't, according to you, to the same degree as some of these other issues, which I am somewhat glad about. Some of the other ones, like, we're mired in things that should be apolitical are mired in politics. We have an imagination gap, etc. I've lived all over the country and never found something more egregious than Southeastern Michigan. Interesting. And some pragmatic things, like I watched a woman in Detroit recently do an interview where she said one of the biggest differences between wealth and poverty is trash collection. And that resonated to this respondent as powerful, but pragmatically very, possibly very fixable problem. So we are, thinking big, but we also are thinking pragmatically and around potentially fixable issues. What are some specific examples of regional disparity that you think about when describing current or historical conditions? And I'm sorry, what I just read was from this. These were your answers. So whoever's hearing something, sorry. So for the last, those quotes are actually from this question. You had a lot of responses, lots and lots of responses, and so the general response I had was wow. these these are specific examples of regional disparity. So again, schools, uh, transit, and lots of other things. Can systematic change happen in Metro Detroit without changing how we do local government? So here, most people said no, maybe not surprising. A lot of people were unsure about this. And I think this was interesting because there were some comments about, yes, we can make the word cloud a future analysis. One of the things that I thought was interesting about this response was people in the commentary said that, you know, maybe it doesn't have to be that local government changes, but we can possibly make progress with a greater level of cooperation, or possible change in how we share revenue, or a possible shared vision by building trust. But that said, most people think that we can't really do what needs to be done without changing how we do local government. Do you think Metro Detroit has an important role to play in the next 100 years as a region leading on climate change? This was probably the most out and out lopsided answer. And the answer most people said was yes, we do have an important role to play. And in terms of this question about regionalism, you know, this is kind of the scale that I pose that we need to take, the kind of time horizon to think about putting this region in a better position where it's not only, you know, our generation, but it's our grandchildren and our great grandchildren who are going to be left with this place. And wouldn't it be great to start putting us on a different path so that we are more sustainable, equitable, and thinking about the climate as part of that, as an essential part of that, and that we could be actually a leader in that way. Just a couple more. The question about philanthropy was interesting. So should philanthropy be more actively working in the space of reimagining local government? Here, again, the majority of people said yes. The questions that people had about, you know, whether philanthropy should be involved is, you know, whether it's democratic, they shouldn't be a leader. There were some very strong no's in terms of how people answered with the additional comment, and thought in some cases, I think in a couple of cases at least, that we should be focusing on something like a constitutional convention to really fully flesh this out in a way that's democratic in terms of governance. But again, most people thought that philanthropy has a role to play in this question and should do more. So most people answered in some positive fashion, keep me on the email list, or actually, I want to do more. I'm definitely interested. And that was also great to hear. I had questions about, you know, whether they thought this was, you know, far beyond the realm of possibility, and they didn't want to have anything to do with that. There were just a couple of those, and those might have been tongue in cheek. But most people, I thought, were very positive about what to do next and wanting to be involved. As an aside, I asked people who had seen the presentation who they thought should also see the presentation. And, you know, I got a lot of usual suspects: MDOT leadership, you know, the coming generation of civil servants, local mayors, council members, SEMCOG, chambers of commerce, etc. You know, county execs. I'm just looking at my notes here, but also interestingly, and, you know, maybe not surprisingly, more Detroiters, more Black Detroiters, younger people who maybe don't even have an opinion yet about, you know, this idea. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and especially in terms of a big part of this, what I'd like to see is a messaging campaign, thinking about the different constituencies and how this really resonates for different people, or could resonate for different people, as a path to solution, as a path to more equity. So our working committee, as I said, have been meeting over this time, and especially over the last 6 months, to really dig into this question a bit more. And I want to talk a little bit about this, and I want to leave some time for discussion at the end. So what we did as a working committee, we met as a working committee. We met pretty regularly. In some cases it was, and I thank Mike and Ann and others for, and I'll lumping several people into this to help guide me over the last few months and really keep on a pointed path. We actually connected informally to folks in philanthropy for their advice, and civic leaders to help shape some of these next steps and really think about what could be possible as a program initiative. So we've done some of that as well. And we've shared what we've, and I'll share this soon, we've shared with folks and got some initial feedback about these high level program concepts, what we might be able to do as a regional effort going forward. They have evolved into sort of 3 funding options, and they're at different funding levels. They're quite interrelated, so I don't want us to get too caught up in it, but it just sort of shows where these sort of buckets of resources might sort of shake out. The key program elements that we've been able to identify so far are a very long horizon, something that is not in the 3-year or 1-year, grant cycle, if that's how it goes, but is actually something that gets into the bloodstream of the region in terms of how it governs, how we talk to one another, what we think about. So it becomes almost second nature. We were thinking 20, 25 years, a generation. So this is something that we think needs that long in order to become successful and stick. We don't want to create something new as an organization necessarily. There are existing organizations. There's tons of existing research and data and information that we can pull from. This is something that we really believe can help connect existing organizations, bolster existing organizations, and hopefully move the needle forward. We want to identify things that can happen. These are big issues, and we know that we've struggled with some of them. Like, thinking about RTA, for example, it lost by a very small, relatively small number of people. We are very close on some things, I think. And so keeping that in mind, we want to focus on the things that are doable, as well as push forward on things that have mired us. A key component of this, I believe, is education. We're calling it education. We can call it propaganda. It's a drumbeat. It's something that people hear and think about as a possibility of doing life differently here. It's disseminated through different channels at different levels to meet people where they are. It can take a space in narrative storytelling and marketing in different ways through events. It's a very broad spectrum, and I see it in that way as being very important. I don't have all the answers to it. I just know that this is something that we need to do to tell a different story about the region and its potential future. And we've talked a bit about program development, something that is tangible, that looks into what is the psychology of residents and stakeholders in the region, and includes what we need to think about as far as addressing sociocultural norms and shifting behavior to do life here in a more regional way. that looks at incentives for cooperation, if we're talking about stakeholders that are in government currently, as well as what it would take to change how they do their day-to-day. And think about that in terms of positive feedback loops. So that program can live for a period of time, for decades even, so that it becomes enculturated into how we work as a region. So I'm going to get into some of these program options, the three that we identified. And keep in mind, I'm grateful for Mike reminding me, it's, that we are planning to plan. We don't want to get too caught up in where we're at right now. We're at this point where we're, just figuring out how to begin this and how to decide what to prioritize and how to articulate that, so that we can design a program that is capable of transforming the region in this way, in this long horizon way, and does it effectively. So there's these three sort of buckets, as I mentioned. I'll just go through them just to give you a sense of them. The first one, the one that is on the left here, 25 to 50K, would include what would build toward a case statement. So a review of literature, interviews, thinking about what we've done in the past, why it hasn't worked, and really turning that into a discrete case statement, as well as starting an education campaign, which I would sort of suggest that, this is what we're doing now. We're building some narrative. We're beginning to understand how to communicate. And so that could be further coalition building. That's you all. It could be doing social media that is more pointed around highlighting these issues of regionalism. And I think we can do that pretty easily for 25 to 50K. And that could be a start. Another take on this would do all of that. So that's just all of the same information. But it would also add some level of public events. So some forward-facing public engagement specifically around regional thinking and regional cooperation. I think developing an identity. So again, not necessarily something that stands on its own as an organization, but can stand on its own as an idea. And then begin to do program development along the lines of what I was mentioning on the previous slide. Thinking about program design, researching what would be the best way to incorporate this feedback and incentives for people who might participate in a program. And then we actually built out something even bigger. And this would be really how we start a 20 to 25 year type program, where we do all of the things that we just mentioned and include a more robust marketing campaign, where you start seeing stuff like on billboards, and if people are still going to the movies, maybe before a movie, but thinking about something that hits people at different levels in a way that gets to some of these different audiences that we identify. And we launch a pilot that hopefully in the next version of this slide deck gets better justified, but we launch the pilot and make it a real thing that begins a cycle of this work. So that, that's kind of how we have landed on these different buckets based on some of this feedback and some of the work that we've done. And we wanted to share that today. So this is where I'd love to hear from you a little bit. We have discussion and next steps. I'm just doing a time check. Oh, we're great. Okay. I was hoping to get done with at least 20 minutes, so that's good. So what's the ask for today and going forward? Well, first of all, does this make sense? And for today's purpose, for the discussion, I kind of want to focus on this. I'm going to take us through the rest of these asks, but I will circle back to this question in 1 minute. I think we also need to identify what organization can potentially host this. This was part of our feedback from talking to people. You know, it probably at least initially needs to live somewhere. Who will support this? We have some ideas about that, some feedback about this, but we need to more clearly identify what funding sources we can look at. We also really need to identify, you know, a dozen of us who can serve in some volunteer capacity, at least initially, to help guide this and lead this. So it might be some capacity or some aspect of this working group or committee, but it might become a formal board or body or committee that is part of another organization. A couple of things that you can do now and going forward, we need to get this out to more people. And I'm very happy to follow up with folks individually and maybe even do this again if people are interested. We've grown a lot in the last year. I think we can grow, you know, twice as much, 5 times as much over the coming months and years. And so it becomes a broader based effort. Just practically speaking, it would be great to start documenting examples of this, to start this feedback loop to help the narrative question. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that, but I will share with you at some point, hopefully soon, some easy way to do that, where we can start that sort of public drumbeat. It might be a Twitter account, or it might be just me individually. We'll figure something out, a hashtag. In terms of today, we have an online poll that I'm gonna share, I think. And I planted it with a couple other people's, but I did remember. So far, I've remembered everything except screwing up one slide a little bit. So here's the poll. It is very short. It basically asks kind of what your time commitment could be for this over the next 6 months. I think we're looking at something to put together as a formal proposal by the fall, the end of the year-ish, and do it over a couple of meetings. So please fill that out. And we're going to collect those poll results. We're going to reconvene the working group, and we're going to target a fall submission. That's exactly what I said. So I'm going to end there, and I want to take the share off and get us back to that question. That initial question is like, does this make sense? What do you think? I'm interested in your sort of initial responses to it. Did that stop sharing?
Yeah, you stopped sharing.
Okay, it's still up, but I'm that's fine. So what did people think?
Jeffrey has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Now I see everybody. Thank you. Oh, and there's like 30 of you. This is great. Jeffrey. Yes, just raise your hand or shout out. We'll get to you.
Good morning.
Hey, nice to see you.
Good morning from Santa Monica, California.
Hey.
I guess I want to say a few things. One, I want to say sign me up for, at least an hour a week, pro bono, voluntary. I would encourage like the thought process of perhaps not just interviews, but maybe listening sessions or focus groups or roundtables. Obviously, it's one thing to shoot for the moon, but it's another thing to have maybe a gold or silver or bronze. approach at least mapped out, even if we can't get to all of them. Something to consider.
Yeah.
I guess I now identify as someone that has left Detroit, not permanently, but I left last September because I was someone that burnt out, felt a little unhappy, and wanted to try waking up somewhere new and exploring other areas I haven't worked in. And so now I'm at HRNA Advisors and something called the Broadband Equity Partnership, working with the state of California and the state of Rhode Island on federal grants and things. And it's amazing. And so I whatever I can lend in terms of broadband and digital equity, that perspective regionally back home, I want to do so. I guess the last thing I would say, in addition to signing up and offering things I'm learning, is that for so long, growing up in Metro Detroit and then being in Detroit for 8 years, Metro Detroit feels like the center of the universe. And out in California now, witnessing homelessness on a level I've never experienced before, living through a drought, in the context of Detroit water shutoffs versus millions of people not having enough water in this state, so is something to process. And then finally, the living expenses out here are greater than I could have ever imagined. So I think these are things for me to mull over and consider when looking at solving problems on a regional level out here, and taking those lessons and solutions back home for y'all. So happy to be a resource. Ultimately, miss a lot of people on this call for sure.
Yeah, really good to see you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, but happy to be a resource. Thanks for having me. I'll probably I got to jump on a train to go downtown, but
oh my God, imagine.
Yeah. I don't have a car out here. I'm walking and biking, and I take a 0.2 light rail, which definitely beats out. No offense to the Q line, beats that out. But
just rub it in, Jeff. Rub it in.
Yeah, and I listen. I deleted all my social media, but I just jumped back on Instagram, so I'm happy to follow folks and try and get back into the swing of things. Appreciate y'all giving me some rest. Love and miss you. Bye, y'all.
Anybody else want to jump in? It doesn't. Yeah, if that totally made sense, then I think David.
As I fumble with my phone here, it's amazing to see so many folks on the call I haven't seen in a lot of years, so this is great. I'm one of these ConCon supporters, and that window of opportunity opens in a couple of years for us. A lot of the regional discussions I've had with folks in Washtenaw, Wayne, and Oakland County over the years is centered around structural challenges to change that are embedded in our state constitution. So I hope that's a legitimate pathway for conversation to consider, because if there is to be a vote for ConCon in the affirmative on our 2026 November ballot, that organizing and conversation stream really needs to be starting now.
Great point. Yeah, when I was in law school, I wrote a paper on regionalism in anticipation of the 2016 the one that never happened. So part of our issue with local government is enshrined in the Constitution in terms of how we deal with home rule, and it's a huge barrier. So it's another big question mark and opportunity as well. And I think we should definitely not lose sight of that timing. It's a mechanics question as much as anything. Every 16 years we get a chance to open that up. Thank you. Anybody else?
Francis, I would make a comment.
Yes. Hi, Janet.
Hey, everybody.
Nice to see you.
This is such a huge and meaty topic that it could be defined broadly or narrowly. And that's, as you said, we may take an inch our way in. But I think you should probably document, are you talking about regionalism as consolidating governments over to the opposite end of the spectrum of just loose collaboration, planning, informal discussions? There's a whole, and I believe the whole conversation should be on the table. But I think it should be clear because it is something that it does have different connotations. Whether you use the word regionalism or not,
Mhm.
people do think different things about it. They think, hey, you're trying to make me pay taxes for Detroit. Or,
Yeah.
they just have a gut level. So I think that can't be avoided to just say you could bucket it, there's 3 types of regionalism, or however you wanna. But I think that's gotta be a little more tangible in the messaging and, the outreach that you're talking about.
I think I great question and comment. I think that at this point, I'm not ready to say, although, obviously I feel certain ways about how things, I wish certain things would be. I don't
Yeah.
know if we want to be explicit right now, but
Not about a goal, but just about
Yeah.
the playing field.
Yeah. No, and I think that explaining the range of what that means, could be part of how we go forward and talk about, what regionalism, like getting that off our chest off the bat. But that's a very good comment. Just seeing the other folks on here, it's funny when you go into a full screen mode, starting with 6 or 7 people, and then all of a sudden there's like 25 people. It's good to see everybody. Who's that? Oh, hi, Gabby, council member. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I came in late. I was about 18 minutes late. But I came in for the survey results and very interested in the conversation of how we change local governments and what that looks like. Did you have any idea about what people were interested in doing? I know for myself, just want to have a more engaged, transparent, collaborative local government, one that works together and through, just because of the person that I am, one that organizes with people, your community residents, to address our needs. But could you think of anything else, or do you have any other ideas of what people meant by the changing of local government? Because I would be very interested in having that conversation and pushing that through other local elected officials as well regionally.
Yeah, that's so. As a follow up to what Janet was just saying, I think that is it's an important idea in terms of that survey question. It was open ended, and so
Yeah.
it was like yes, no. But some people sort of like did dig into it a little bit and said, I think you may or may not have heard what I was saying to that point, which was, maybe we can make substantive change without, actually consolidating government or structurally changing government.
Okay.
And that's certainly an option. I mean, if that were the case, or if that was, we might not be sitting here. So somewhere in that space of continuum, I think, is are interesting potential answers. And that was brought up in some of the survey responses.
Got it. So it was structural changes. Okay. Some of them were the answers. Okay.
Yeah, it was structural changes, I think was implied, but people responded differently.
Got it. Okay.
Chris, do you want to talk to that, or do you have a separate question?
Did you say Chris?
Yeah, Chris. I
Hi,
saw your
Francis.
hand
No,
up.
I guess I might have had a separate question, although it wasn't so much a question as much as I wanted to try. I had a thought that tied together what the council member was saying, or more to the point, she really helped kind of the light bulb go off over my head. But also Jeffrey had mentioned the idea of, moving forward with engagement with different communities and residents of the region. The thought had come up about roundtable discussions, and I just wanted to throw out, I think it would be interesting if there are opportunities to have roundtable discussions. And I'm happy to help support this if it's what we want to move forward, kind of help, raise awareness or make introductions or try to invite elected officials or get folks engaged, both from the local, but maybe more to the point at the state level. And I guess to get to my point, I love the idea of roundtables. I love the idea of having, when possible, an elected official at the roundtables, because I think in addition to hearing from constituents, residents directly, which is always worthwhile, I think it will help perhaps communicate or empower or give folks from the community who come to speak a feeling that like they're being listened to, or they are speaking to some true people who have some levers in the quote unquote systematic power structure. And I guess more to the other kind of related point, and this is where, just for whatever it's worth, I have started a new role recently, working as Director of Government Relations for the Wayne County Executive. And so I'm up here in Lansing more and trying to think through, how do I get folks who aren't from Southeast Michigan, aren't from Wayne County, to really support and understand the importance of projects and initiatives down there where they don't live and maybe have some misconceptions. And so if there are opportunities, I'd be very curious to hear you or others' perspective, or ways to invite folks who maybe even aren't from the region, but state leaders. I am hoping to get local, or I should say state elected representatives, senators, oftentimes, as it is in this moment, Republican. We'll see if that changes come this fall. But people from outstate, perhaps Republican, think through ways to get them to Southeast Michigan, see some things, talk to some people. I think that could really be helpful when it comes to really maybe changing some attitudes and some power dynamics, or getting some policies moved at the state level. And definitely now got my thinking cap on as it relates to that constitutional convention. I hadn't realized 2026. Okay, we got some time to think about it. But anyway, I will land my verbal plane there, but just wanted to thank you for organizing and thank everyone who shared their thoughts so far. It's really helped me think through it and chew on it. And it's hard, but I'm feeling like, ready to keep trying. So thank you.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thanks, Chris. Dominic, I see your hand up.
Hi, Francis. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Good afternoon. I think Chris and I's light bulbs went off at the same time about sort of hearing Janet and council member and Jeffrey sort of talk about those things. And I think the roundtable thing, the idea is definitely the way to go. I mean, just for like thinking about ConCon and the process part of it, and how philanthropic organizations play a role in that, and all the different subjects that and the multitudes that all this exists. I would definitely start just like with the process part, and definitely have a few roundtables, and then maybe as you go along, you can get into the even more nitty gritty around the actual issues, like education or transit or whatever it is that comes from those other discussions. So I just wanted to triple down on the roundtable idea.
I'm hearing that loud and clear. That's good. Thank you. David, I see your hand up.
Just some of the points that were just made, I'm thinking in the range of, other examples of programs and concepts and introductions that have been very successful, from like the position of Michigan Municipal League or the MEDC, in thinking about economic development programs and opportunities out for rural Michigan communities that have the effect of having coattails that support the things that we want to see in Wayne County or the city of Detroit or the city of Birmingham or these other areas. So there's a number of really nice strategies, which is what I suggested on the survey, that it would be interesting to see if the MML would actually house an initiative like this, to see, even through their foundation potentially, to host, working groups around the state to have these listening sessions. And ConCon in particular is a blunt force tool that can be used to reimagine life in the 21st century for Michiganders, and how that would work in a different structural framework. So MML immediately comes to mind. I know I've had a lot of discussions with Richard Murphy over the years, who I assume many of you know, Melissa Milton Pung as well, and and Helen Johnson at the foundation there. So if there was a way to pull them into the envelope and see where this fits in the MML's overall priorities, ultimately the councilwoman and her colleagues across the state are often convening in that space to begin with, and they have a public push for sharing information that is, I think, ultimately consistent with the outcomes that you're looking for here, Francis.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Thanks. I see. So I just opened up the survey. Thank you for people have already started filling that out. So please, here, I will share the link again if you need it. There. And anybody else who haven't, I'm finally getting a full sense of everybody's comment. Thank you. Like, it's great to see Lauren and Julia and Tess, John. Any sort of final thoughts that people want to leave with, aside from please get out and enjoy what seems to be might be warm, but a beautiful day otherwise? Anything else?
Yes,
Tad,
thank you.
thank you. Thanks for joining, council members.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, I won't keep anybody past now. And if you haven't eaten your lunch, please get to your lunch. And if you have, get to the rest of your day. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks. I got to jump on another call. Great.
Bye, Ann.
meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. I'll
Thank
send
you.
a little follow-up note afterwards. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Sorry, Francis, I had a different call I had to take for a second, but this is Ian. My only thought was, I feel so far removed from these meetings because I've been just working for private companies over the last 6 years, and I've not been good about volunteering or doing other things that would put me into contact with, let's say, the community development world.
Ian, it's all right. I don't hold that against you on a daily basis.
Exactly. No, but so what I was thinking is like
every once in a while.
I enjoy doing these every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I also kind of get frustrated with them because I'm like, man, I just want like really clear action items that have short-term impact. And I know that's like totally antithetical to the whole concept of regionalism in Southeast Michigan, which is going to take forever. But I just feel like, at least for me living in Grosse Pointe now, like I think there would be so much support for regionalism in the context of stormwater and water management.
Yeah.
And, it's like the anniversary of the major flood that hurt so much of like Grosse Pointe, St. Clair Shores, I think Dearborn, so many of these like older suburbs with older infrastructure, when the water was coming from like 30 miles away, because of how the water system's set up. I just wonder if like you said yourself, okay, so on transit, we were really close, but we lost. Okay. So maybe like that's still worth fighting because it was so close. I wonder like, what are the 3 issues that are the most realistic, that are the closest, that are the most, trending, so to speak? Because obviously we don't have the culture of regionalism here where we're going to be able to like do everything all at once. And Michiganders just don't get it intuitively like maybe people in Minneapolis do. It's just not in our blood here. So I think it becomes much more like tactical.
I agree.
So
I agree with you. The water as a primary objective in some form or fashion has been mentioned multiple times, and for some of the same reasons that you talk about. Parks is
so emotional here. Like obviously it would make sense to do transit, but because of the history of Detroit, it's just such a loaded topic, right? That I wonder if something like water isn't a better place to start because of stormwater, because of houses, which people care about, like because of lead, because all these things that we've had to deal with in the last like 5 to 10 years in Michigan. And I think I could get most excited and help most if it was like one specific thing, because I feel like if there's 10 initiatives that everybody's pushing at the same time, or like some new regional nonprofit or authority that's going to lobby for this or that, I think it'll just die on the vine personally. But I'm really like encouraged that people are interested, and that doesn't mean the conversation shouldn't happen like this. But as far as
Right.
like funneling it into like an action item or like the first campaign, like I would love to go fight in that first campaign about water and
Water.
stormwater.
Yeah, that's where you put down the gauntlet. I hear that. I 100% hear that, and that's definitely been in our conversations. And when I say
Yeah.
ours, just like, you know, I mean, Mike is here. He's spent a lot of. We've been talking about this for a decade now.
Yeah.
So I think
So I'll come to these. You know, it's like for like I don't have a ton of. I don't know. I don't feel like I have a ton of extra bandwidth or confidence in doing everything. But if it gets real specific to one thing that I feel like is close and I can help with,
right. I would only, I totally agree with you. I would only say that in terms of doing this effort, understanding that issue or that handful of issues in the context of these broader systematic things is a goal of, I think is an important thing
Yeah.
to tie it together, so that if it is successful, hopefully the next thing will be that much easier. You know, it's sort of like they're all connected. What rises to the top? Maybe it is water management, and having that as the goal makes the next things easier, and it has to be sort of thought of in that way. But I don't disagree with anything you said.
yeah,
Mike,
and
do you have
I'm
any?
thinking of like what issue unites like people in the Detroit neighborhoods, Grosse Pointe, other aging suburbs, far out suburbs, crosses county lines. It's like water doesn't really care about any of that because it's based on
it flows.
natural forces and topography.
Right.
And
It
so
flows.
it's like, I don't know. Yeah.
The only thing I have to add is you're spot on, Ian, that we'll use water as the example. The goal here would be understanding the 20-year time horizon of how to make big systemic change, but starting with the quick win, and the quick win could be something like water because it never actually uses the word regionalism. So, but you need to have, as Francis said, you need to have like all your ducks in a row. So after that first quick win, it creates momentum for something that's a little more audacious, then more audacious. And then all of a sudden you get to your big moonshot after 20 years because you thought about the first step and the last step and how to get from A to Z.
Yeah. Just like, but the last thing about the water is like, for example, Grosse Pointers, after the big flood that was a year ago, there's a ton of talk about like the pumping stations at Connor Creek. There was a ton of talk about like the substations in Grosse Pointe Park that also contribute to the problem. There was a ton of, I know we've been getting water lead testing kits in Grosse Pointe a lot more over the last 2 years. So I just think it's like, it's all up there in our collective consciousness. I think it's already been there for a lot of Detroiters and the water rates and the shutoffs. I just don't know what other topic is. The only thing political I feel like about it was maybe how, not the only thing, but like how Snyder handled Flint and all that stuff, which was terrible. But I think it's just, it doesn't have a history of being political for as long as something like transit or, I don't know, local governance or something like that.
I think what Francis proposed today is to tease out those, is it water? I think you're, like you said, or Francis has been mentioned a lot. And if it is water, what does that mean in terms of like, okay, we've identified it's water. What does that mean for a program or a quick win? And that would be the in-depth dive of this effort, is to figure out those 1 or 3 issues, figuring out what that means in terms of the next steps for those issues, and then how to get like galvanize the coalition of the willing, land it at a place that is housing it, and then moving towards the long-term plan at the same time.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's exciting if we can narrow it down. So
Thank you.
thanks.
I mischaracterize that, Francis?
No, I think that was all great. And Ian, what you have said, other people have said, and I think for good reason. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. And thanks for joining. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys. I gotta roll now, but
Yeah.
talk to you next time.
All right.
All right. See ya.
Bye.